The destiny and future of the Balkan states, and of all the small European peoples as well, will not be regulated by fratricidal wars, but with this great European struggle, the real object of which is to settle the question whether Europe shall enter an era of justice and therefore happiness for the small peoples, or whether we will face a period of oppression more or less gilt-edged. And as I always believed that wisdom and truth will triumph in the end, I want to believe, too, that in spite of the pessimistic news reaching me from the different sides of the Balkan countries, there will be no war among them in order to justify those who do not believe in the vitality of the small peoples. The conference at Rome, April 10, 1918, to settle outstanding questions between the Italians and the Slavs of the Adriatic, drew attention to those Slavonic peoples in Europe who were under non-Slavonic rule. At the beginning of the war, there were three great Slavonic groups in Europe. First, the Russians with the Little Russians, speaking languages not more different than the dialect of Yorkshire is from the dialect of Devonshire. Second, a central group, including the Poles, the Czechs or Bohemians, the Moravians, and Slovaks, this group thus being separated under the four crowns of Russia, Germany, Austria, and Hungary. The third, the South group, included the Slavonians, the Croatians, the Dalmatians, Bosnians, Herzegovinians, the Slavs, generally called Slovenes in the western part of Austria, down to Gorizia, and also the two independent kingdoms of Montenegro and Serbia. Like the central group, this south group of Slavs was divided under four crowns: Hungary, Austria, Montenegro, and Serbia. But in spite of the fact that half belong to the Western and half to the Eastern Church, they are all essentially the same people, though with considerable infusion of non-Slavonic blood, there being a good deal of Turkish blood in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The languages, however, are practically identical, formed largely of pure Slavonic materials, and curiously, much closely connected to the Eastern Slav group, Russia and Little Russia, than with the central group, Polish and Bohemian. A Russian of Moscow will find it much easier to understand a Slovene from Gorizia than a Pole from Warsaw. The Ruthenians in southern Galicia and Bukovina are identical in race and speech with the Little Russians of Ukrainia. Of the central group, the Poles have generally inclined to Austria, which has always supported the Polish landlords of Galicia against the Ruthenian peasantry, while the Czechs have been not so much anti-Austrian as anti-German. Indeed, the Habsburg rulers have again and again played these Slavs off against their German subjects. It was the South Slav question affecting Serbia and Austria that gave the pretext for the present war. The Central Slav question, affecting the destiny of the Poles, was a bone of contention between Austria and Germany. It is the custom to call the South Slavs Yugoslavs, from the Slav word Yugo, to south. But as this is a concession to German transliteration, many prefer to write the word Yugolav, which represents its pronunciation. The South Slav question was created by the incursions of three Asiatic peoples, Huns, Magyars, Turks, who broke up the originally continuous Slav territory that ran from the White Sea to the confines of Greece and the Adriatic. Little Serbia, before she was overwhelmed by the concentrated force of a mighty Teuton drive, and afterward did some fighting that astonished the world. The photo shows some of her artillery engaged in holding back the enemy in the mountain regions near Niš. From the woods in the background, the British charge on an angle of the German breastworks under cover of artillery and machine gun fire. This illustrates the early trench warfare, before the development of the elaborate concrete protected structures the Germans later devised. They can be seen wearing the famous spiked helmets, which were later replaced with steel ones.